So tonight I'm going to show you how to shoot great photos of the moon with almost any lens. So I'm going to show you the progression of focal lengths all the way from 24 millimeters, which is insanely wide, and I honestly don't know why you would shoot moon photos on 24 millimeters, but I'm going to show you anyway because, why not? And then also, I'm going to show you all the way up to 500 millimeters and show you how wide that's going to be, 24 millimeters compared to 500 millimeters. I can get some insanely good shots at 500 millimeters with this lens, more than I will be able to get at 200 millimeters, just because it zooms in way more, and I'm going to be able to get way more detail on this 500 millimeter lens than I will on this 200 millimeter lens. Tonight I'm using the Nikon Z50 and the F to Z adapter with both of these lenses. They're both vintage Nikon lenses that I've collected in my life's journey. This is an amazing 500 millimeter lens, and this is an amazing 80 to 200 macro telephoto lens. This lens is, despite being a macro telephoto, you can actually change whether or not it's a macro lens or not just by simply turning this dial. So right now I have it set into macro mode, and then now I can change it into telephoto mode. And it's just that simple. This lens is great for when you want to shoot flowers, but like you can't get super close to them. Like if it's in the middle of a bush and you can't get to it, it's really great. And it's also great, which I'm going to use to show you my example moonshots tonight. So you're going to want a lens that has a very low aperture, because you're going to be able to get much brighter shots, and going to be able to have a lower ISO and a higher shutter speed, so you'll get less motion blur and less noise. You're going to want to shoot with the tightest lens possible, because you're going to be able to get a whole lot more detail than you will if you're just stacking a lot of images together. So I'm shooting with this 80 to 200 tonight. I would normally shoot moon photos with this 500 millimeter, but I know that not everybody has a 500 millimeter lens. So I'm going to show you how you can do this and get almost the same results on this 500 millimeter lens as the same as this 200 millimeter lens, and how you can achieve great results with just the 200 millimeter lens, because that's a very popular lens. Not a lot of people have a 500 millimeter lens available to them. I'm just lucky enough that I have one. You're going to want to figure out what time the moon is going to rise. For me, right now while I'm recording this, it rises really late into the night. It's almost 1 o'clock tonight, and the moon still has not yet risen. So you're going to want to figure out what time the moonrise is going to occur. I use this great app called Moon Locator that I have on my Android phone, and it works really well because you can set in the time that you want to see where the moon is going to be at certain times. And it's also an AR app, so you can see where it's going to be. If it's going to be like down there, or like wherever. You're also going to want to try and catch the moon as soon as it rises, because I'm going to show you a time lapse later, but the moon as it rises gets smaller. So you want to catch it right as it comes up to get the best possible results, because it's going to be biggest right as it comes up. Another thing is you're also going to want to take tons and tons and tons of pictures. When you have enough, you take a couple more. So you might get back later and go, oh, these didn't work because 3 of them are out of focus, or like the shutter speed wasn't right, or the apertures, or whatever it may be. It can go wrong. So you want to figure out how you're going to do that, and you're just going to
Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to edit your photos. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to go through and choose at least 5 that are very sharp and don't have any motion blur or a ton of graininess. It's okay if they have a little bit of graininess, because we're going to stack all of them together at the end to make sure that there's not a lot of graininess, and you're going to get a much sharper image that you can crop in a lot more. So what we're going to use to do this is Lightroom Classic, which you don't need, and I'm going to show you how you do that later. You need Photoshop to actually stack all the images together and remove the noise. And then I also like to use Topaz Labs Denoise AI. It's not necessary, but it's just something that's really cool to use, and it can remove a good amount of grain, and it can also sharpen your image a bit. So also, you're going to be glad that you shot so many photos, because later when you get back, a lot of them aren't going to be great photos. And you just got to choose like as many as you possibly can. I'd say the max you'd probably want to do is like 20, but because my computers can just get really slow after 20. But so I've gone through and I've chosen 12 here, and then I've labeled them in Lightroom Classic. So these are my 12, and you can see when you open them up that they're quite grainy, but they're not like super motion blurred or anything. And that's okay because we're gonna fix them later. So like this one, it's pretty good. That's a pretty good image. I mean, you could even do that's a good image there. But when the way we're gonna do it, where we stack all the images together, is gonna be way better. And you're gonna get way less noise. So when we're stacking images like this, it can take a lot of strength from your computer to do this. And my laptop always needs to be plugged in when I'm doing this, because then otherwise it just takes forever to do. It takes like 10 minutes to do one step. So you just want to have it plugged in. Okay, so now that you've gotten your images all selected, you're going to go through, select them all, and then you're going to right click on one of them and hit edit in. Now you're going to hit open as layers in Photoshop. And what that's going to do is it's going to open up a Photoshop file with all of your photos as layers. So here, when I do this, so you can see now that I have all my photos opened up as layers in Photoshop. And what I'm going to do is, so if I actually hide one of these, you can see that it moves because my hands aren't going to stay still the entire time. So it moves depending on, because your hands aren't going to keep the camera completely still. Even if you have it on a tripod, the moon is rising continuously and it goes up very fast. So no matter what you do, you're going to have layers that look like this, where you can see where they're missing, where you can see where they're not aligned. So what we're going to do is to fix this is we're going to select the first one, and then we're going to shift click the last one so that they're all selected. We're going to go to edit, auto align layers, and you're just going to hit OK. Make sure it's on auto, otherwise it's going to give you something really weird, and you're just going to hit OK. And you can watch. So it's going to align all my layers together so that they're all on the same position, and then I can just change the blending mode so that I can see all of the layers together, and it'll just be a much sharper image. You're also going to notice once it's done aligning them, there may be areas around the edges where there's pixelated areas where there's not going to be anything. So for that, you're just going to leave it like that, and we'll fix that up later. Yeah, so now you can see that it's done, and you can see that I have lots of area around the edges where it cropped it out so that it could align all the images together. But don't worry, because we're going to fix that later. And right now we're going to go to Layer, Smart Objects, and Convert to Smart Object. Okay, so now you can see that we have our one smart object in the Layer section. So this actually took a really long time. I'll probably cut it later, but it took a really long time even though my computer was plugged in. So you see that the layers on the side are still all pixely and there's nothing there. But what we can do now is we can go into the layer menu, smart objects, stack mode, and then we're going to do mean. Mean is another word for average, and it's going to pick the average moon photo, and it's going to combine them all together to try and get the sharpest image possible while not getting grainy. This is going to take a second to load, probably. And this should fix the black areas around it. Okay, so it's been about a minute, and you can see the edges around it are no longer all pixely and white. And you can see now if we actually zoom in, you actually don't lose a lot of detail if you zoom in. So it's a little bit blurry around the edges. So I mean, you can bring it back into Lightroom Classic or Lightroom, and you can just use the sharpness slider, and that should fix it all good. You don't want to do it too much because of the way that Photoshop combines them. It will get like grainy in a really weird way, and you'll get some weird artifacts. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this. Make sure that when you save it as a JPEG, because when you have something as a smart object and you try and save it, a lot of the time it's going to try and make it into a TIFF file, which you don't want because you can't really do anything with a TIFF file. So you want to make sure it's a JPEG file when you save it. And that's pretty much how you do it. Like I said, there is ways that you can do it without Lightroom Classic, which basically what you're going to do is you're just going to open up all the photos individually in Photoshop, and you're just going to duplicate the layer onto the main photo. And then you're just going to do the same process and do auto align, and then convert it to a smart object, and then set the blending mode to mean. Okay, so these are my photos showing the progression all the way from 80 millimeters all the way to 500 millimeters. So this is our 80 millimeter shot. You can see it's really far away, and you can even see some of the lights from on the ground here. And moving on, we have 105 millimeters, and here you can see more detail, and you don't see like the ground or anything or any of the lights from down on Earth. And this one, if you zoom in, it would still be really grainy, but you can take photos like this just using the stacking method that I've just showed you. And then also here is the 300 millimeter shot. This one has a little bit of motion blur, just because I had my shutter speed too low, but you can see this would be a great shot for posting online or whatever if it didn't have motion blur. And then this is the 400 millimeter shot. This one's a great shot. It's a little bit noisy, so you probably want to run it through something so that you can get it less noisy. Or you can just stack it like I've just showed you. And then this one I've cropped a little bit. This is my 500 millimeter shot, and you can see all the detail in the moon. You can see craters in the moon, and everything, and all the little details in the moon. Okay, so here's my final image. You can see this is a great image at 200 millimeters, cropped in later after I've stacked it, so that it doesn't get grainy, and it's an amazing photo. I mean, I could post this online, and nobody would even know that it wasn't on like a giant telephoto lens. Thank you for watching this video, and goodbye.